Good evening to you. Welcome to From the South. My name is Regan Devines. We begin with this evening's headlines. Argentina's second presidential runoff election is but a day away, but it would not be complete without a scandal. Brazilians joined forces to save the aquatic life in the Rio Doce after the deadly mudslide claimed the lives of 11 people. And in Iraq, 10 people are killed after a Shiite mosque is bombed. The details on these and other stories right now. Argentina closed its electoral campaign on Thursday ahead of the historic runoff that will put an end to the Kirchner family presidency. Over 32 million Argentines will have to choose between two very different models. The candidate of the ruling Front for Victory, Governor of Buenos Aires Province, Daniel Scioli, has promised to retain the popular welfare programs of current President Cristina Fernandez, while the business-friendly Mayor of Buenos Aires, Mauricio Macri, promises to open Argentina's economy after years of protectionist policies.
It's very serious. This pact with the devil that the Alianza candidate Macri has made. The Baltic Funds, the International Monetary Fund, that wants to come to impose the removal of subsidies, so that you have to pay at least 3, 4, even 5 times the price of light, gas and transportation. That's what I represent, the defense of your jobs, of your salaries and your families.
Argentines, we are ready. We're ready to live in a marvelous era of our history. And I want each of you to go home today knowing that it's begun, that it's true that the moment has come, that it is now, that it is here, in Humahuaca, in the north of Argentina, and that we say that together we will build a new Argentina. Let's go Argentina, let's go Argentina, change!
Still, President Cristina Fernandez pushed for the continuity of her policies, which can only be done by her party's candidate, Daniel Scioli.
We can talk about the things we are going to do, because we have the guarantee from all that we have done. And this transformation is going to end, because Daniel Scioli is going to be president to all Argentinians, and it's going to continue.
Meanwhile, a WikiLeaks cable revealed by the Center for Economic Policy and Research in Washington shows that Cambiemos candidate Mauricio Macri asked the United States for help to confront the governments of Néstor Kirchner and Cristina Fernandez. The cable shows that Macri had met with then Secretary for the Western Hemisphere, Thomas Shannon, who had urged him to, quote, set limits on the Kirchner's misbehavior, end quote. Furthermore, the same cable shows that Macri had announced his presidential bid to the US Embassy in 2009. A growing number of economists and financial commentators have called for caution against the current evaluation that Mauricio Macri of the neoliberal Cambiemos coalition has suggested could become a reality if he manages to prevail in the November 22nd presidential runoff, labeling it as dangerous for the common worker. Telesur's Leo Pobletti Coduti has details from Argentina.
According to leading economists and political analysts, the right-wing Cambiemos coalition, led by its presidential candidate, millionaire businessman Mauricio Macri, will direct its economic policy towards a return to the International Monetary Fund if it prevails in this Sunday's runoff.
Unifying the dollar into a single rate of exchange, as the Cambiemos coalition proposes, means that taking the official rate, which is today at 9 pesos 50, up to 16, the current rate of the dollar on the illegal black market. This would mean an impact of at least 50% increase in prices, which would directly affect workers' salaries, suffering a major blow to its purchasing power.
The incumbent Front for Victory acknowledges that Argentina will require more funding from abroad, but has said that in order to do that, the country must close the chapter on the vulture funds affair first, but only on terms that favour Argentina's economic well-being, adding that a return to IMF dependence and its conditionings is totally out of the question.
When the worker goes and buys a refrigerator or a blender, for example, they will see that prices of goods have gone up substantially. And that is when they will realize that their salary is weaker and it's not enough to buy those goods.
The thousands of Argentines who have taken to the streets to show Daniel Scioli and the FPV their support have widely said that they are against a return to neoliberal economic policy, which always includes IMF intervention on a sovereign country's finances.
I think that to joyfully talk about devaluation is extremely vicious, especially for those who know Argentina's history well. On the other hand, I hope this backfires against the neoliberal coalition, because frankly, the fact they are talking about a devaluation this lightly and openly, and lying by saying that a currency devaluation will not have any negative consequences, when history demonstrates otherwise, I think is something very negative.
Estamos viendo cómo quiere avanzar en Brasil, y si avanza en Brasil, avanza en la Argentina, se va a echar por tierra con todo lo conquistado, pero no lo permitiremos.
Specialists say that if Mauricio Macri wins this Sunday's runoff, he and his advisors already have the mechanism required to gain new finance from the IMF in mind and ready to go. They plan to surrender to the vulture funds and pay what New York Judge Thomas Griesa has ordered. Other creditors, known as the Me Too creditors, will want the same treatment, and Argentina would potentially have to pay up approximately $20 billion, putting massive strain on the country's reserves, which would inevitably lead to a new bailout package from the IMF and its interference in Argentina's economic policy. Leo Politico-Uti, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
For the first time in years, the flow of Mexicans leaving the United States has surpassed that of Mexicans arriving, and it's at its lowest since the 90s. Telesur's Clayton Khan explains.
In a historic shift, more Mexicans who have immigrated or migrated to the United States are now returning to their homes in Mexico than new migrants arriving to the United States. Now, this is according to a study by the Pew Research Center based on official information from both Mexico and the United States. Now, more than 1 million Mexicans returned to their native land compared to an estimated 870,000 that emigrated to the United States between 2009 and 2014. According to the Pew researchers, in the last 10 years, Mexican migration to the United States has taken a dramatic drop, pointing to a greater militarization of the border, as well as the relatively slow recovery from the United States' 2008 Great Recession, especially in sectors such as construction, which has been historically a big area of employment for many Mexican migrants. Also, the study cited that 61% of those Mexicans who returned claimed that it was based on familial reasons. Now, over the past 50 years, more than 16 million Mexicans have migrated to the United States, yet by 2010 the flow stabilized, and according to the Pew study, the flow is now in reverse. This is Clayton Khan reporting for Telesur.
Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has signed a new collective labor contract that will protect 2.5 million workers, reaffirming his commitment to laborers. A crowd received Maduro at Plaza Bolivar in Caracas, where representatives of the workers called the signature of this contract as historic.
We have signed the overall contract that will protect 2.5 million workers. I have the document here for the specially allocated resources. Now, these resources must be extraordinary in order to once and for all ensure wage protection, age premiums, training, increased support to savings accounts, housing plans, holiday bonus, and other things that I'm going to explain now simply and directly, but preceded by signing the decree that shall be sent to the National Assembly.
A month ago, Honduran Yankel Rosenthal was captured in New York, accused by the United States Treasury Department of laundering drug trafficking money. He is a member of one of the region's most powerful economic families, and his capture has had a strong impact on the Honduran economy in recent times.
The capture of 2 members of the Rosenthal family in the United States was the excuse used by the Honduran government to try to take over a fortune of over $1 billion. The closure of the Continental Bank and of many other companies of the Continental Group has caused the dismissal of more than 10,000 Hondurans in the last month.
We have to understand this within the current situation of Central America, particularly in the so-called North Triangle case, where organized crime and illicit economy have gotten out of hand, even in the United States standards. So this means that it was necessary to send some signals from the hegemonic power. This signal has been applied against someone with a powerful name in Honduras, letting everybody know that if they were touched, anyone else can also be touched, and that they are putting the new boundaries on the region's economic elite.
Yankel and Gianni Rosenthal probably will be set free because of the lack of proof, or because they have proved that the money they accepted from people related to organized crime was in business that had the validation of the Honduran state. In that case, the Honduran authorities that took over the multimillionaire group will have to face the responsibility to give back what they have already distributed among other national banks close to the current ruling party.
There will always be an alert in these cases where there is competition among traders, among people working in the same commercial activities, because there can always be bad intentions. And in this case, there might be bad intentions of trying to use a crisis in their favor, increase their supporters, and try to affect other entities and get rid of the competition.
The Rosenthal family has already made a formal petition to the Honduran state to get their properties back. What was a warning call from the United States for the region's economic elite can become a very expensive error for the Honduran government that believed that one of its strongest oppositors was already brought completely down and now will have to face them in other conditions. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
Peru has allocated close to $3 million for the second phase of a project designed to protect the famous Nazca lines from possible damage stemming from the El Niño phenomenon. El Niño causes a weakening of winds, allowing heat to accumulate, and this weather shift causes flooding in some areas and droughts in others. As a result, severe floods, outbreaks of mosquito-borne illnesses, and catastrophic damage to crops and infrastructure, as well as to heritage sites, is expected. The Nazca Lines, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, are ancient geoglyphs located in Peru's Nazca Desert. Some are simple, stylized lines, while others are more complex representations of animals, the most recognizable being a hummingbird. Many in Brazil, including fishermen, experts and local volunteers, have joined forces to save aquatic life after two dams burst, releasing a thick, potentially toxic mud into the River Doce. Scientists say that if the sludge hardens, it would result in reduced oxygen levels in the water and diminish the fertility of riverbanks and farmland. The incident, which many blame on Brazilian mining company Samarco, resulted in the deaths of 11 people, with 12 still missing. And another volcano is turning out to be some cause of concern for Ecuador. This time, it's the Tungurahua volcano in Guerrero. An orange alert has been issued by the government after the volcano shot ash over 8,000 feet into the air. The ash covered houses and fields. Experts say it's been the greatest mass of ash registered in the past 5 years. And here's a look at what's coming up next. The terrorist attack in Mali has come to an end, leaving a trail of death and questions. That story and more next. After commandos entered the Radisson Hotel in the capital of Mali earlier on Friday, officials are still assessing the situation there. Police say that members of the jihadist group Al-Murabitun, which is allied to Al-Qaeda, stormed the hotel. At least 21 people are currently dead after the siege. At the time, there were some 120 people inside the hotel, but police believe they've been able to rescue all the hostages inside. Mali's Minister of Internal Security, Colonel Salif Traoré, said that a thorough search of the Radisson Hotel is ongoing. A Shiite mosque has been hit by bomb attacks in southern Baghdad, resulting in the deaths of 10 people. Reports are that there were 2 bombs that detonated within minutes of each other. The first one was a suicide bomb. The other exploded in the roadside next to the mosque. Among the dead are 2 police officers, with 4 others having been treated for injuries. There have been no claims of responsibility for the deadly attack. And this is footage of Russian missiles. The Russian military says it's flown 394 sorties and hit 731 targets in Syria in the last 3 days. Specifically in Syria's Deir ez-Zor province, they said that cruise missile strikes there have killed some 600 rebels. They have even released bombs with writing on them. On one was written for our guys, and on another was written for Paris. Every year, the world recognizes World Children's Day, and this year, young people in Gaza use the day to speak up. Telesur's Nohara Zain shed some light on a marathon festival in Gaza where children run for their lives.
The Islamic Relief Association, in cooperation with the Palestinian Ministry of Education, launched Thursday a marathon festival entitled Running Towards Hope in Gaza Strip on occasion of the World's Children's Day, celebrated every 20th of November. The marathon race was held under the supervision of Palestinian Federation of Athletics. About 1,000 racers, chosen previously from various primary and secondary schools across the besieged territory, arrived at Gaza seaport, the starting point of the race, at 9 a.m. and ran an estimated distance of about 2,000 meters towards a Sheikh Ajnin area in the south of Gaza City. At the end of the event, the winners were awarded for their performance. Telesur TV met with a Palestinian runner who has hope that the marathon would be a message to the whole world, showing them that the children of Palestine want to survive and have the right to play and enjoy like other children around the globe.
The European Commission has agreed to present by the end of the year a plan to reform the Schengen border code to allow systematic and obligatory checks at all external borders for all travelers, including those who benefit from free movement. This is a crucial change, and once again, a strong request from France was satisfied.
Dr. Nader Halawa, the spokesman of the Palestinian Athletics Federation, said that the marathon aims to extend the sport of athletics to include all Palestinian society, specifically school children, pointing out that running is regarded as a beneficial way of providing emotional discharge and psychological support for the children of Gaza. Nur Harazin, Telesur TV, Gaza.
Another effect of the Paris terrorist attacks could be the reform of EU's passport-free Schengen zone. At an emergency meeting, the European Commission agreed on Friday to present a plan by the end of the year to reform the Schengen border code in order to allow systematic and obligatory checks at all external borders. This measure would be for all travelers, including those who currently benefit from free movement inside the EU. In the meantime, European interior ministers also agreed to temporarily tighten checks at Schengen external borders. French Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve described the measure as a crucial change. Refugees who had been left stranded near the Macedonia border this week are now being granted passage. However, it's only being granted to those refugees who travel from Syria, Iraq and Afghanistan. This has created a tense environment there. However, the United Nations referred to it as a controlled situation. Others have been deemed economic migrants, such as those fleeing poverty from countries such as Nepal and Bangladesh, and have not been granted passage through Macedonia.
These measures by states are creating tension at border crossings and a domino effect, leaving in total limbo some refugees and migrants stranded at different border points. UNHCR and IOM have been working with governments to increase reception capacity in the affected countries and install protection against winter conditions.
Jonathan Pollard, an Israeli spy, has been released after spending 30 years in a U.S. prison. However, the conditions of his release have been deemed unreasonable and illegal by his lawyers. Pollard's lawyers said that their client is required to not only wear an electronic bracelet so his movements can be monitored, but also that his computers and those of any employer who hires him be subject to what was called unfettered monitoring and inspection. His lawyers have filed a petition against the U.S. Parole Commission. According to its website, the SOA Watch is an independent organization that seeks to close the U.S. Army School of the Americas through vigils and fasts, demonstrations and non-violent protests, as well as media and legislative work. And hundreds marched in Washington earlier today, Friday, in support of an extension to 2 immigration policies that could benefit 5 million people. The decision is now in the hands of the Supreme Court. For more information on this, we go live now with our correspondent Bianca Perez, who is at that march. Hi Bianca, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us. Now, we understand the SOA Watch is a grassroots movement whose main goal is to close the U.S. Army School of the Americas and to change U.S. foreign policy in Latin America. Can you describe what's happening at the march right now?
Yes, as you mentioned, we were at the march this morning. A large group of organizations marched from Arlington, Virginia, all the way to the White House. There were also protesters outside of the Supreme Court asking that the deferred action for parents of Americans and the deferred action for childhood arrivals, the case that is now before the Supreme Court, be listened to and voted in favor of the immigrant community. As some may know, these two programs would essentially halt the deportation of 5 million people in the U.S. right now and grant them some sort of relief and a path to legalization. In a way, they would be able to obtain work permits, they would be able to obtain driver's licenses, and begin a process of legalizing their immigrant status here in the U.S. So they woke up really early this morning and they're demanding President Obama to continue fighting for this. As we mentioned, this is now in the hands of the Supreme Court, so all they can do is really wait and keep pushing, keep fighting, keep trying to make their voices heard. Also, some of them told us that they want people to hear them and understand a little bit more about the situations of immigration. They feel that all of the hostility that is being seen is because of a lack of information. So they're trying to push for to defer more information throughout the U.S. so that people understand a little bit more of the large role that immigrants play in this country.
Just for those who may not understand or know the context of this, do you by any chance know, can you explain exactly how the SOA Watch was created?
Are you speaking about the deferred action and the deferred action for parents and the deferred actions for childhood arrivals, Regan?
And when or why were they why was it created?
Okay, so both of these were executive actions that were presented by President Obama last year, exactly a year ago today. And essentially what they do is they would grant parents of U.S. citizens, so they came here undocumented and their children were born here. It would give them a path to legalization. Same with the children who came here since they were very young. Their parents brought them, and a lot of them didn't know that they were undocumented. And it gives them an opportunity to actually attend school, go to universities, and have a career, get a job here. So these two are the executive actions that they are fighting for. They are currently halted by a appellate court decisions that 26 states were against this executive action, and the appellate court upheld that those 26 states had the right to do this, to not implement the executive orders because President Obama was out of bounds in making this decision. So currently it has been passed to the Supreme Court, and as we said, they will have to vote on that sometime before June of 2016.
All right, totally understood. We'll continue following this story. Thanks so much for taking the time again, Bianca. Have a safe weekend.
Weekend.
And moving on now, here now is a brief look at other major stories around the world.
Members of the BRICS economic bloc met in Russia to sign a memorandum of cooperation on energy and energy efficiency. Representatives of member countries Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa were there to sign on to various forms of cooperation within the bloc. After 24-year-old African-American Jamar Clark was shot dead during an altercation with police officers in Minneapolis last Sunday, Black Lives Matter activists have been calling for justice. While police claim Clark was shot while resisting arrest, the activists are demanding to see the CCTV footage of the incident. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras says that with the recapitalization of the country's banks, economic stability is returning to Greece. However, hundreds of retired army, police, and naval officers marched in the streets on Friday in protest against pension cuts, which they say reduced their incomes by 60%. And Burundi is laying the blame of its 1972 genocide on its former colonial ruler, Belgium. Spokesperson for President Nkurunziza, Willy Nyamitwe, said that Belgium is responsible for all the difficulties the country is facing, having divided Burundians into Hutus and Tutsis, which have historically been at war with each other.
Bolivian construction workers have discovered archaeological remains believed to date back to the pre-Columbian Tiwanaku society. The remains were discovered while the workers were excavating new lines for an aerial tramway in the capital La Paz. According to local archaeologists, this is the first time such an ancient discovery has been made in the capital's urban center. The remains have been dated to 100 or 200 BC. The findings include ceramic shards from urns, crude cutting tools, and bones of a llama that may have been used as a sacrifice. An exhibition has been cancelled in Santiago, Chile back in 1973, that was cancelled back then, has been reopened 42 years later. The exhibit on Mexican political artists was set to open on November 13th, 1973, but the coup d'etat 2 days before, which would lead to Augusto Pinochet's dictatorship, prevented it. It is called the pending exhibition Orozco Rivera Sigueros. The painting survived the attack against the Bellas Artes Palace, where they were being kept after a tour across 70 countries. Their curator managed to take them back to Mexico, and they never left until now. And to close this evening, at the National Grand Theatre in Beijing, renowned Russian choreographer Boris Eifman conducted one last rehearsal on Thursday before the opening of his ballet, Anna Karenina. The ballet will run at the National Center for the Performing Arts in Beijing from the 20th to the 21st of November. The ballet is Eifman's longest tour in the 40-year history of the Russian ballet company. Anna Karenina is one of the most popular in Eifman's repertoire, having been shown on nearly every continent in the 10 years since its premiere. And that's how we end it on this Friday evening. Be sure to join us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, and for more on these and other stories. You can also visit our website, telesurtv.net/English, for extensive coverage of the latest breaking stories. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela, for Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. Have a great night and a great evening.